I've adapted Chandler. I've adapted Douglas Adams many times. I'm in the middle of doing it again with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's probably because I don't have any ideas of my own. That may be one reason. But the more fun reason, the reason that makes me feel better, is these are all authors I have loved since I was a very young person. These are the authors who made me want to be an author. And so it's such a privilege to be able to go and take apart their extraordinary works and then put them back together in new mediums. And one of the hopes of doing that is that you bring them to new readers and to new audiences. And so with Chandler, who is really one of the greatest stylists of the 20th century, or indeed who has ever lived, to bring him to folks who love comics, who may not have read the originals, but for whom our adaptation can be a sort of gateway drug, was a big appeal. In my view, there are two ways to do an adaptation. One is you are rigorously faithful, and you are simply translating the original work to a new medium. The second approach is a sort of homage. It's like being a tribute band, where what you're really doing is trying to capture the feel and the tone of the original, but to some extent, tell your own story. I've done both, and I think which you do depends very much on the source material. In the case of the Chandler, we are largely being faithful to the original story, but here's the gloss. The original story is one of the first short stories Raymond Chandler wrote. He wrote it in 1939. And in the first version, and I think he would say this, it isn't done. It isn't great. It's not perfect yet. And he came back to it in 1951 and rewrote it. And it's in the rewriting that he puts in Philip Marlowe, his iconic private detective. And that's where he really fleshes it out. And so there was sort of a license already. Given that Chandler had adapted it himself, I felt a little freer to adapt it once more. And so what we've done is to preserve the essence of the original, but to embroider in the margins, to flesh out secondary characters, to give them inner lives. Chandler's hero is always his detective, Marlowe, but he was such a great writer that he decorated the novels with extraordinary secondary characters. His femme fatale in this, Harriett Huntress, of the most wonderful name, and the red hair that burnt like a fire that was dying out but was still dangerous. There's also George Hastelman, the mysterious chauffeur, a black man who went to Dartmouth and has ended up in a position of surprising influence over the billionaire client. So there were these clues in the original, and with Chandler you have to follow the clues. And so in our version, Harriet and George are given inner life, are given their own point of view, are allowed to be narrators, albeit briefly. And we sort of start to see the worlds in which Marlowe was investigating, and not only his point of view. I do seem to have a rather weird sideline in eccentric detectives, as well as Philip Marlowe. I've spent a lot of time in the company of Dirk Gently, Douglas Adams' holistic detective. I think the craving for detective stories, which goes back at least to Edgar Allan Poe, is that we crave order in a universe that doesn't give it. We crave justice in a world that doesn't serve it. And the detective, this singular presence, this person of integrity, who will restore order, who will give justice, who will catch the bad guys, however clever they are, and who will also explain the crime, explain the why, explain the darkness, not just of the villain's psyche, but of our own psyche. I think that's something we look for. I think it's what Jung called the shadow in each of us. And I think the detective is the man or woman who finds our shadows for us. The joy with Chandler is he wrote some of the best descriptions ever written. And so to give those descriptions to two incredibly talented artists, Ilias Krianis and Chris Peters, the artist and the colorer respectively of this book, and to say to them, here's how Chandler wrote about it, now realize it. It's the reason Chandler is so adapted in film. It's because his descriptions are exquisite. He sees Los Angeles and he sees his noir world with an eye with incredible facility for detail and with a gift for metaphor and simile that is almost unrivaled in the English language. And so to give that to artists of extreme talent and say, make those metaphors real, make them flesh. And that's what we try and do in this book. So for example, we gave each character their own color scheme, each of the three major characters. Philip Marlowe is a creature of noir. He's in black and white and sepia, as he should be. That's how he sees the world, in shades of grey. Harriett Huntress is all technicolor. She's a woman of optimism and drive, a modern woman before her time. And so she, like Dorothy, steps into a world of color. And then George Hastelman. He's his own thing. He's not quite as grey as Marlowe. He's not quite as vibrant as Harriet. He exists in a sort of washed-out world, a world that aspires towards color. So we had those chances to take the implicit ideas in Chandler's prose and make them explicit in drawings. So I've had a strange journey towards this. I've always worked in storytelling, but for whatever reason, and I'm sure there are deep psychological scars that speak to this, I sort of didn't dare being a full-time writer for a long time. I spent my life producing other great writers, and I've enjoyed that, and I've been exquisitely happy to learn from them. But over the years, many of them have said to me, "You're not terrible at this story thing. You might want to try doing it yourself." And so very gradually, I have been. And the pandemic, as it did for so many people, threw everything in the air for me, changed my life in many ways. I moved, I became a dad, and I became a full-time writer. And that's what I do now. And this year, with the Raymond Chandler book coming out, with my Douglas Adams intellectual biography coming out, with 2 plays opening in London, feels like I may not be pretending that I'm a writer anymore. That's quite nice.